My name's Jade. I'm 47. Principal at a public high school in Indiana. Divorced. My only son just started college in Ohio. He texts. Rarely calls. It's okay. That's just how boys are. I live alone now, in a modest 2-bedroom house, on a quiet street, where everyone waves, but no one really talks. Most evenings look the same: cup of chamomile, leftovers reheated, the local news humming in the background. There's comfort in predictability. After the chaos of a 15-year marriage, quiet became sacred. People say I'm reliable. That's the word they use. Jade, you're so dependable. They mean it kindly, I think. But sometimes, it feels like code for invisible. That Thursday evening, I was making roasted carrots. Nothing fancy. Just olive oil, salt, and thyme. The kitchen smelled earthy, warm. The sky outside dimmed to that soft purple that means night is coming soon. And then my phone rang. It was my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, drying my hands. No pleasantries. No, "How are you?" She jumped right in. "Your sister's going through something." Of course she was. She lost the part-time gig. And with the kids and all, it's just overwhelming. I leaned on the counter. I knew this wasn't a catch-up call. My mother's voice had that tone. Sweet, but rehearsed. Like a waitress asking if everything tastes okay, when she knows the soup was cold. "She's behind on the mortgage," she continued. "A couple months now." Silence sat heavy between us. "We were hoping you could help," she said. "Just for a year, until she gets back on her feet." I closed my eyes. There it was. The ask. This wasn't the first time. Cheyenne has always been dramatic, spirited. That's the word they used. Meanwhile, I was disciplined. Translation. I had a job, and didn't make messes other people had to clean up. I didn't answer right away. "It's just for a year, Jade. You're in a good place." She's drowning. A good place? It wasn't a request. It was a setup. It brought me back to 17. I'd gotten into the art institute. I wanted to paint, to move, to live where people wore black, and talked about things that mattered. But Mum had said, "We can't afford out-of-state tuition." So I stayed. 1 year later, Cheyenne was off to a 2-week dance intensive in California on their dime. That pattern never broke. I paid her hospital bill when she had that surgery, and forgot to sign up for insurance. I lent her cash when she had that weird business scheme with essential oils. Being the stable one wasn't a compliment. It was a sentence. When you're always expected to be the giver, people stop seeing you as someone who can bleed. "I'll think about it," I finally said, my voice flat. There was a pause. Then, "I thought you of all people would understand family." She hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, carrots still roasting. My chest felt tight, but my face didn't change. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I've used every month since the divorce. Income, savings, projections. I knew what I'd see. Helping Cheyenne would mean dipping into retirement. Again. "Family should be a circle," I whispered. "Not a drain." I stared at that number in red. Then I did what I always do when the math doesn't add up. I called Melanie. Melanie and I go back 20 years. We've seen each other through layoffs, funerals, weddings that ended too fast. She answered on the first ring. "They want me to pay Cheyenne's mortgage," I said. There was a beat. Then, "Are you surprised?" "No," I admitted. "Jade, they keep treating you like a safety net, because you never tear." "I feel guilty," I whispered. "Like saying no makes me a bad daughter." "You're not a bad daughter," she said. "You're just the only one who acts like an adult." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I'd unravel. Then she said something I won't forget. "If loyalty costs your peace, it's not love, it's leverage." After we hung up, I opened a blank email, and I wrote. I told them I loved them. I told them I wished things were different, but I couldn't keep absorbing the cost of Cheyenne's choices. I explained my financial limitations. I used every polite word I could find, but I didn't bend. I ended the email with this. Responsibility is love in action, but so is teaching people to stand on their own. I hovered over the send button, then clicked. The silence in the house felt different after that. Not peaceful, Not heavy, just honest. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. We're disappointed. Very. I stared at that text, wondering when disappointment stopped being a two-way street. The text came Friday night. Let's just have a nice family meal and talk things through. Saturday, 6 p.m. Your father's grilling. It was signed, of course. Mom? No heart emoji. Just punctuation that felt like a door creaking shut. I stared at it, longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend it had never arrived. But the other part, the responsible part, that's been steering this ship for decades, decided to go. Maybe I needed to see their faces. Maybe I was curious what manipulation would look like in person this time. Saturday afternoon, I picked up a pie from the grocery store. I never bring homemade anything. It's easier that way. Less judgment. Less commentary. Fewer opportunities for Mum to say, well, Cheyenne always had such a natural hand in the kitchen. The drive to my parents' place felt like walking into a memory you didn't ask for. Every streetlight, every cracked sidewalk, every stretch of worn siding on the neighbors' homes, they were all part of the scenery I once called safe. Now they felt like echoes of choices I didn't make. Their house stood just as I remembered. White shutters, a flag flapping on the porch, the scent of overwatered mums hanging thick in the air. My stomach tightened before I even turned off the engine. I walked in with the pie, fake smile intact. The first thing I noticed? Everyone was already there. Cheyenne, Doug, their two kids, too quiet, too neat. Aunt Calliope, my parents, all seated, all waiting. I was the final piece. Jade, sweetie. Come in, Mum said, her voice too cheery, too rehearsed. The dining table was set, like a Norman Rockwell painting, except the smiles felt glued on, and the warmth was off. I was seated directly across from Mum, and right beside Cheyenne. Cheyenne didn't say anything, just gave a small nod. She looked tired, or maybe that was the plan. Fragile always earned her sympathy points. Dinner started with pot roast and small talk. For about 5 minutes. Then the script kicked in. You know, family means showing up, Mum said, passing the mashed potatoes. Not just when it's easy, but when it's needed. Dad chimed in, casually. Your sister's got a full plate. And you, Jade, you've always been so organized, so prepared. Cheyenne stayed quiet, chewing slowly, eyes watery. I knew that move. It was one of her greatest hits. Aunt Calliope smiled thinly. You've always been the strong one, Jade. It's really something. We used to say you had an old soul. The air felt tight, around my neck. I reached for my water but didn't drink. Then Dad said it. We've been thinking about the inheritance. Just like that. My spine straightened. We want to do what's fair, he continued. Cheyenne's got a home to keep, kids to raise, and you, well, you're secure. You're not raising anyone anymore. I blinked. We're not saying you're selfish, sweetie, Mum added quickly. Just that this would help everyone sleep better. Doug cleared his throat. It's not about money, really. It's about stepping up. I didn't recognize this version of them, but I did. It was just louder now, less subtle. You wouldn't want the kids to lose their house, would you? Mum asked, her eyes sharp behind the concern. I tried to speak, but each time I did, someone cut in. My voice was background music, to a performance I never auditioned for. Finally, I set my fork down. I'm not doing this, I said, softly, but clearly. My refusal isn't cruelty. It's clarity. Silence, but not the peaceful kind. I'm tired of being the one who sacrifices so others don't have to grow up. Cheyenne's chair scraped back. Hard. She stood. You know what? This was a mistake. Doug followed her without a word, their kids shuffling behind like little shadows. Mum's eyes welled up, but not with sadness. It was anger, glossed in parental disappointment. Aunt Calliope cleared her throat and placed her napkin on her plate. Well, I suppose every family needs a black sheep. I didn't flinch. I helped clear my plate and walked to the door. Nobody stopped me. The air outside was cooler than I remembered. I walked to my car, set the pie in the passenger seat untouched. I sat behind the wheel but didn't start it, just stared at my hands. That house was never a home, I whispered. Just a proving ground, for who could endure the most without breaking. My phone buzzed. A group text. Dad, thanks for ruining dinner. Hope you're proud. I deleted it without reading it again. Turned the ignition, rolled the windows down, and drove. The wind was sharp, the night quiet, and for once, I didn't feel like apologizing for the silence. I got home late. My apartment was dark, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, more like something's pressing on your chest. I tossed my keys on the counter and kicked off my shoes, towing them toward the wall. The pie from dinner was still in the passenger seat. I left it there, let it go bad. Felt fitting. I heated up some leftover lasagna, but it just sat on the plate, steam rising into the stillness. I took one bite, chewed, swallowed, set the fork down. The TV clicked on with a documentary about forest fires, something about root systems and survival, but I didn't hear a word of it. Just noise, just distraction. My phone buzzed twice. Cheyenne. I didn't open them. Not because I was angry, because I didn't care what excuses she'd built this time. I sank into the couch, my hands folded in my lap, and stared ahead like I was waiting for a verdict. My own voice crept in. When did this start? Not the pressure, not the manipulation, but this ache, this gnawing sense that I was outside looking in, that I'd never fully been in to begin with. And then I remembered. I was 10. Birthday coming up. I had circled a red mountain bike in the Sears catalogue, page 12. Lower left corner. I taped it to the fridge. Told Mum. Told Dad. I even told Cheyenne. It was all I talked about for weeks. The morning came. Balloons. Pancakes. And a box wrapped in pink foil. Not bike-shaped. Inside was a sweater. Pink. Scratchy. Before I could even force a smile, Cheyenne came skipping into the room, nearly toppling over with excitement. She was 7, and she was pushing a brand new red mountain bike. My bike. I looked at Mom, stunned. She's been eyeing it too, Mom said, as if it made sense. We figured you'd understand. You're older. Dad ruffled my hair and added, It's not about things, Jade. You're the strong one. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I swallowed it. Bit down so hard on my own voice it vanished for years. I never asked for anything after that. Back in the apartment, I blinked hard. My lasagna was cold. Strong one. It wasn't praise. It was a leash. Every time they denied, asked me something, they called it strength. Every time they handed my sister more, it was because, you're already fine. I thought about college. How I gave up art school because we can't swing tuition this year. Only to find out Cheyenne got a full summer in Europe for a ballet program the next year. I sat up, walked to the bookshelf, pulled down a photo album, one of the old ones with sticky pages, and handwritten captions, flipped through recital pictures. Cheyenne front and center in sequins. Me? Tucked behind the taller girls, barely visible. I remembered asking for a solo that year. Let your sister have her moment, Mom said. You already had yours. I hadn't. I never did. There it was again. That phrase I used to whisper to myself. Just be grateful. I said it like a prayer. A leash I learned to wrap around my own neck. Tonight, it didn't feel holy. It felt like betrayal. My throat tightened not from sadness, but from mourning. Mourning the little girl who sat on the steps watching someone else ride her bike down the sidewalk. For once, I didn't push it away. I closed the album and set it gently back on the shelf. Then I walked over to the window, pulled the curtains back, and let the night spill in. The city was humming outside, indifferent and alive. I didn't want to be the strong one anymore. I wanted to be free. I opened my laptop, created a blank document. At the top, I typed, Reclaiming the Strong One. Then I started writing just for me, a list of every moment I bent backward, while everyone else sat comfortably upright. Every time I took on the weight so they could keep floating. Every time silence was mistaken for maturity. Every time obedience was rewarded with invisibility. They thought my strength meant I didn't need love. But what they never asked, what they never saw, was how much it cost. And now? Now, I'm done paying. The call came on a Thursday morning, around 9:15. I was in my office, halfway through responding to emails, when I saw Mum flash on the screen. I let it ring to voicemail. 10 minutes later, a text. Sunday dinner. We need to talk about the future. Hope you'll come. Love you. Not, would you like to? Not, we'd love to see you. Just, we need to talk. That tone. That familiar wrapping of guilt, in cellophane politeness. I stared at it for a few seconds. Phone in my hand. Thumb hovering. There was no doubt what the future meant. It wasn't about my life. Or theirs. It was about Cheyenne. Again. Still, I said yes. Not because I wanted to. Not because I thought anything would change. But because there comes a moment when silence starts to rot from the inside. And I was done rotting. Sunday afternoon, I pulled into a gas station 2 blocks from their house. I didn't need fuel. I just sat there, watching the pump loop digital numbers into someone else's tank. I took a deep breath. I told myself, stay calm. Stick to the facts. Don't let them turn you into the villain they want you to be. And then I drove on. When I walked up the porch steps, I noticed the begonias were trimmed. The door had a fresh coat of paint. Someone had lit cinnamon candles inside. Too clean. Too staged. Cheyenne opened the door. Oh good, you're here, she said, like we hadn't just stared through each other across a battlefield a few days ago. The living room was already full. Dad in his chair, Mum fussing with the salad tongs. Even the grandkids were quiet. Colouring in the corner. The air was tight. On the coffee table, laid out like a brochure, was a manila folder. I didn't have to open it. I knew what it was. The couch had a spot saved for me, right between Cheyenne and Aunt Calliope. We made it through 3 bites of pot roast before the conversation took its turn. Your sister's really been struggling, Mum started, slicing through the silence, like it was part of the meal. We just think, maybe it's time to talk openly. I put my fork down, chewed, swallowed. We're not trying to push you, Dad added, but this could be an opportunity for you to step up. To help. I nodded slowly. And what do I get in return? Mum blinked. Dad stiffened. Cheyenne sighed, like I'd made a scene in a library. It's not about getting something, Dad said. It's about being someone. That did it. I leaned back, crossed my arms. Is that what you told yourselves? All those years you gave her everything, and called it parenting? Jade, Mum warned. No, I said, voice steady. You always treated her like the one who mattered, the one who needed protecting. And I was the strong one. Translation? The one you could ignore. Cheyenne let out a choked laugh, then tears. You've always resented me. Admit it. No, I said. I resented that you never had to grow up. I resented that you could fall apart and still be comforted, while I held everything together and got lectures instead of hugs. Jade, this isn't productive, Dad started. I'm not here to be productive. I'm here to be honest. Mum folded her napkin slowly. We did our best. You were just harder to love. I went still. That hit harder than anything in that house ever had. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I stood. I then love her. With your own money, I said, my voice firm. I'm done carrying debts I never owed. You're turning your back on family, Dad said, rising slightly from his seat. No, I said quietly. I'm facing the truth. For once. I picked up my purse. My plate still full. The folder stayed where it was. Unopened. No one stopped me as I walked toward the door. Not even Cheyenne. Not this time. Outside, the late afternoon air hit different. Cooler. Not free, but clear. I didn't look back. A week passed, with silence, as thick as winter fog. No calls. No texts. Not even a, how are you from my parents or Cheyenne. I poured myself into work at the law firm, like someone trying to mop up a flood with a towel. I got there before sunrise. Left after dark. My boss praised my renewed focus, but my co-worker, Lydia, leaned against my doorway one afternoon and said quietly, You're far off lately, Jade. Like you're here, but not here. She wasn't wrong. Every night I went home to my small apartment, made a single-serving dinner I barely touched, and sat in the glow of the TV without really watching. I'd been tolerating this dynamic for years, under the excuse of keeping peace. But the peace had been false. Now, silence felt less like surrender and more like the slow tightening of a spring. On Thursday, just as I was shutting down my computer, an email came from Cheyenne. The subject line, "Just us two? No drama." I stared at it for a long time, feeling the old reflex to fix things, trying to kick back in. Then I typed, "Tomorrow, 3 p.m, corner cafe." The next afternoon, the cafe was quiet, soft jazz playing, sunlight pooling on wooden tables. Cheyenne sat in the far corner, both hands cupped around a mug, like it could warm something inside her. She looked tired, her makeup uneven, hair pulled back loosely, but her eyes still darted, scanning, searching for an opening. "I'm glad you came," she said, voice low. "It's been hard. Everything's been hard." I nodded once. "I figured you wanted to talk." She sighed, then leaned forward. "I need you to talk to Mum and Dad. They're really stressed. They think maybe if you just..." "Cheyenne." My voice wasn't sharp, but it cut through her sentence. "I'm not your fallback plan. I'm your sister, not your savior." She blinked, taken aback, then gave a little laugh. That wasn't a laugh at all. "You're so cold. You've changed." "No," I said. "I've stopped bleeding quietly. That's all." She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "You know I've never had what you had, right? What exactly do you think I've had?" I asked, leaning forward. "Approval. Attention. A bike on my birthday. You've had a safety net. I've been the net." Her lips parted. "You're making it sound like I planned this. I'm telling you what's real." My voice stayed even, but my pulse thudded in my ears. "And if you or Mum and Dad push this again, I won't just say no. I'll say everything I've never said. Out loud. To anyone who'll listen." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, clean and sharp as glass. I stood before she could rally. "I'm willing to have a relationship with you, but not if it's just another transaction." Her eyes followed me, but she didn't speak. She just stared at the mug, like it could tell her what to do next. On the sidewalk outside, the wind cut across my face, cold and dry. The old guilt tried to slip back in, whispering that I'd been too harsh. I shut it down. "I can care without caving," I murmured to myself as I walked to my car. That night, at my kitchen table, I opened my journal. I wrote down every detail of the conversation, not to gloat, but to remember how I'd stood my ground without losing my dignity. This wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming the space I'd been giving away for decades. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my father. His voice was clipped, measured. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Don't push this too far." It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't love either. I deleted it without saving. They still thought this was the old me, the one who would eventually fold. They hadn't met the version who doesn't break. 2 weeks passed. Just enough time to convince myself things might settle. But on a Tuesday evening, right after I got home from work, I opened my mailbox and froze. A thick envelope. Return address. My parents' home. The label read, "Summons and complaint." I stood on the porch for a long moment, heart thudding. I knew the law. I'd sent envelopes like this, but this one was for me. Inside were printed pages, pages and pages, filed formally with the county clerk. A legal claim, in black and white. My parents, Marla and Robert, suing me. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, legally. They were demanding reimbursement for past expenditures, emotional services rendered, and mortgage obligations related to family property. There were itemized charges, grocery bills, from 2006, a prom dress they bought for me in high school, contributions to their HVAC system, and then 3 bold paragraphs insisting I owed Cheyenne's mortgage. I sat at the edge of the couch, papers trembling in my lap. It didn't feel like family anymore. It felt like I was a line item on their balance sheet. It took me an hour before I called Cassian. He was my friend, but more importantly, my attorney. I trusted him to strip emotion out of facts. He picked up after the second ring. "You all right?" "I got served," I said. "By my parents." I sent him the scanned documents. 5 minutes later, he called back. "This is garbage," he said flatly. "Most of this wouldn't survive a preliminary hearing. There's no basis. No legal precedent. It's a coercion tactic, Jade. They're not suing for justice. They're suing to break you. I figured. He sighed. You want to file a countersuit? I paused. Not yet. You sure? They're putting a price tag on raising me, Cassian. Like, I'm an invoice. He didn't say anything for a second. Then quietly, that's exactly what this is. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan blades spinning, thinking about every little act of sacrifice I'd made over the years. Every bill paid, every job offer passed, over to stay nearby. Every time I swallowed my truth, just to avoid stirring the pot. By morning, something inside me had hardened. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking apps. I closed the joint account I'd been using to send help money to my parents for years. I turned off the scheduled auto transfers. Then I opened our family group chat. Typed. Effective immediately. I'm suspending all financial support until legal matters are resolved. Please direct all further communication to my attorney. Then I hit send. Silence for 5 minutes. Then, seriously? Jade, what the hell is this? This isn't how we solve things. You're hurting the family. You're acting like a stranger. I read every message. Didn't reply to a single one. Let them stew. Let them feel what it's like when the silent one doesn't stay silent. Cassian filed the motion to dismiss. Later that week, the clerk gave us a hearing date preliminary, just to review filings. The morning of the court date, I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed sharp. No makeup except foundation. I wanted to be clear-headed, not performative. They walked in 3 minutes before the hearing. My parents. And Cheyenne. All in coordinated neutrals. Like they were trying to project grace under attack. My mother's eyes were glassy but firm. My father didn't even glance at me. Cheyenne stayed 3 steps behind them. Arms crossed tight. I didn't speak. I didn't nod. I just watched. In the courtroom, the judge skimmed the documents, asked both sides to submit financial disclosures, and issued a standard order: preserve all records, digital and physical. No fireworks, no tears, just protocol, paperwork. But behind every file exchanged, a war was brewing. Outside the courthouse, I paused on the steps. Cold air bit at my skin. I thought about the thousands of dollars I'd already spent on legal fees. The copier ink, the scanned receipts, the time I'd never get back. They were suing me for gratitude, and not even real gratitude. Gratitude they thought I owed them, for simply raising me. I looked down at my phone. Dozens of messages still unopened. They weren't trying to win this case. They were trying to remind me of my place. But they were too late. The version of me they'd always banked on, the silent one, the one who folded, was gone. I got into my car, shut the door, and looked straight ahead. This wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be invisible one more day. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in my home office, surrounded by folders, emails, and notes that had been slowly building, like sediment layer after layer, of things I once chose to ignore. Now they stared back at me. I reread every claim in the summons, compared it against receipts I'd kept, texts I hadn't deleted, financial logs I almost threw away twice. I highlighted discrepancies, made bullet points in the margins, tried to stay clinical, but my hands still trembled. I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head. You're making a mistake. Don't push this too far. That wasn't a warning. That was a threat wrapped in a scolding. My phone buzzed. Arden. Text. Be careful. They'll push back harder now. I typed back. That's exactly what I'm ready for. I went to bed restless, stared at the ceiling like it might hand me a verdict. Whatever happened tomorrow, I wasn't walking in weak. The next morning, before heading to the courthouse, I made a quick stop at the family house. I'd told Cheyenne I'd pick up a few records still boxed in the garage. She answered the door, hair a mess, holding a coffee mug that said, "Mama knows best." I didn't comment on the irony. She let me in without words. I walked past the living room, where her daughter Eulalia was building something with blocks. Her tiny voice echoed across the room. Mum always says Aunt Verity's sister helped with the house. I stopped cold. So did the 2 neighbors on the porch, just outside the open window. Cheyenne froze. "Sweetie," she started, rushing to hush her. But Eulalia went on, "Sweet as can be. That's what you call her, right? Aunt Verity's sister." The words stung more than I expected. Not because Eulalia meant harm, But because that was it right there, that's who I was to them. Not Jade. Not the daughter who held this family together when everything was breaking. Just a footnote to Verity. The neighbors avoided eye contact. One made an excuse to leave. Cheyenne gave me a weak smile. Shrugged like, kids say things. I turned to her. Why don't you ever use my name when you talk about me to her? Cheyenne blinked. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I mean. She looked away. That told me more than anything. I didn't stay long. Picked up the box, said goodbye to Eulalia, and left without another word. Back at Cassian's office. He was waiting with something in hand. A manila folder. Thicker than usual. We found something, he said. And you're going to want to sit for this. Inside were copies of the property title from when my aunt died. I'd contributed financially back then. Repairs, taxes, everything. But I never formally demanded my name be added. Trusted them. That trust, like most things in that house, had been repurposed. The deed had been quietly refiled. Not just without my name, but with a forged notary signature. And Verity listed as sole heir. Cassian slid a highlighted copy across the table. Original drafts included your name. It was scrubbed later. And this signature? He tapped the corner. It's a fake. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even feel yet. Just a white, slow, angry, quiet. They erased you before you even knew to look, he said. I sat back. The room spun slightly. This was it. The shift. The proof. I want it on the record, I said. Chain of custody. Witnesses, if needed. We move forward. All the way. Cassian nodded. Understood. That evening, I didn't go home. I drove straight to my parents' house. Knocked on the door like it was a business visit. Like I didn't belong to them anymore. They were all there. Mom, Dad, Cheyenne, Aunt Calliope. Even Verity showed up halfway through. I placed the folder on the dining table. Sat down. Opened it slowly. You took my name off something I helped pay for, I said calmly. And you did it before I even knew enough to protect myself. Mom started crying immediately. Dad tried to wave it away. We didn't think it mattered. You never asked to be. Cheyenne wouldn't even meet my eyes. Verity leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Calliope stood up. Let's not. No, I said. You always tell me not to make a scene. I'm not making one. I'm stating facts. I pointed to the page with the forgery. This is your legacy? This is what family means? Silence. I gave you my truth, I said, voice steady. Now I ask you to face mine. No one spoke. I stood. Walked out without waiting for a single reaction. Let the door shut behind me. Outside, my legs were shaking. But I kept my back straight. I didn't need their apology. I needed their pattern to end. In the car, I saw I had new messages. Voicemails too. I scrolled past them. One from my father. You'll regret this. I hit delete before it even finished playing. Regret is built on fear. And I don't live there anymore. I was sipping lukewarm coffee in my living room. Scrolling aimlessly. When the podcast alert popped up. Verity was on air. That alone was enough to raise my blood pressure. But the title was what stopped me cold. Legacy and Leadership. How I built the family name. I turned the volume up. And for the next 30 minutes, I listened in stunned silence, as Verity spun a version of our family's history that left me out entirely. I managed the inheritance, made the tough calls, and held us together, she said in that carefully calculated tone she always used for public praise. People don't realize how hard it is to protect a family name. Not everyone can shoulder that weight. Some just talk about burdens they never carried. I didn't hear my name once. But I heard the target in every word. My phone buzzed. Arden. They're rewriting history on air. I didn't reply. I stared at the speaker, jaw clenched, pulse pounding in my ears. She wasn't just deflecting. She was claiming the entire story as hers. And that was the moment I decided I wouldn't stay silent anymore. That same afternoon, Arden came over. I hadn't told him I'd listened to the podcast. But he knew. He didn't waste time. You need to see this. He laid out documents, internal reports, loan paperwork, emails, with time-stamped approvals. 5 years ago, he said, you used your own assets to refinance the business when it was collapsing. If you hadn't done it quietly, they would have lost everything. I blinked. How do you have this? I used to be their accountant. I kept copies. I shouldn't have morally, but something told me the truth might matter later. The air shifted. I wasn't just some forgotten relative with a grudge. I was the one who stepped in when everyone else was drowning. Arden leaned forward. You want to respond? Not with emotion. With evidence. I nodded. We don't just respond. We publish. We spent the next few hours drafting a statement. Simple. Documented. Measured. It wasn't vengeance. It was correction. Later that evening, the family sent out an invitation. One of those thinly veiled gatherings, meant to pretend they were trying to heal. I went. Not for them. For me. They gathered in that hall like nothing was burning. Verity stood near the head of the breather table. Smug. Celestine made small talk with the cousins. Dad sipped from his whiskey glass, like he always did when pressure built. I walked in with a manila envelope tucked under my arm. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I read from a prepared statement. I am not asking for anything more than acknowledgement, but I will no longer allow erasure. I contributed financially to the family business when no one else could. I protected what you now take credit for, and I have documentation to support every word. The room fell still. I also have legal counsel, I continued. And we've established the retitling of the property was fraudulent. Verity started to speak, but I cut her off. You've had your say in public. Now it's my turn. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I told the truth, and I let the silence afterward speak for itself. When I finished, I handed Arden the documents and walked to the center of the room. I'm ending all financial support, effective immediately. No more automatic transfers. No more hidden bailouts. No more helping quietly. I pulled the bank authorization papers from my purse and tore them in half. Gasps! Verity shouted. You can't do this. I turned to her. I can, because I always should have. She didn't move. No one did. That was the moment I knew the balance had shifted. Not because I had yelled louder, because I had spoken clearly. As I left, Arden confirmed what I already suspected. The lawyer had filed the legal hold over the disputed property. My name was finally on the radar. Outside, the night felt clearer than it had in months. I leaned against my car and let out a breath I'd been holding for years. Not sadness, relief, and something else. Vindication. My phone buzzed. Arden again. You just rewrote your story. I stared at the screen, then replied. They will see me now. I didn't realize how quiet my apartment could feel, until the noise stopped. No more court filings, no family group chat, no expectation to explain myself. It was just me now. I started waking up early again, something I hadn't done since college. I'd sit at the kitchen counter with a notebook and write for 15 minutes. Sometimes it was just a list of things I didn't want to carry anymore. Other times, I'd write to the version of myself that stayed silent for too long. Work trickled back in. A few old clients reached out. After seeing the press release Arden helped me draft, I rebuilt my consulting schedule, slowly, carefully. And I joined a support group. I didn't think I'd ever be the type to sit in a circle and talk about childhood wounds. But the first time someone else said, "My mum only noticed me when I failed," I felt something shift. Twice a week, I volunteer at a nonprofit that mentors women trying to rebuild after abuse. That first day, I met a girl not much younger than me when I left home. She asked how I stayed calm in conflict. I told her the truth. You stay calm when you've already decided who you are. I said it for her, but maybe I needed to hear it too. 2 weeks after the family gathering, I got a call from my father's lawyer. They'd been closing out his safe deposit box and found a sealed envelope addressed to me. I stared at it for a full hour before I opened it. His handwriting was messier than I remembered. The letter was short, awkward, even. But I read it 3 times. I never knew how to show love, Marisol. I didn't know how to talk to a daughter who didn't need rescuing. That scared me more than I ever admitted. But I admired you. I always did. I just didn't know how to say it without feeling small. I didn't cry at the end. I cried in the middle when he wrote, "If you ever wonder why I stayed distant, it wasn't because you disappointed me. It was because I thought I already had." That's when the tension left my chest like air from a balloon. I forgave him that same night. Not because he earned it, but because I didn't want to carry that ache another year. A few days later, I drove through my old neighborhood. I parked outside the diner Mum used to love. It was still there. New signage. Same smell of grease and burnt toast. A little girl was playing with her dad near the curb. He was letting her braid his hair. They laughed so loud. A few passers-by turned to smile. And I didn't feel jealous. I felt glad for her. She wouldn't have to unlearn what love means. I walked down to the beach, found a bench, pulled the letter out of my coat pocket. Let the words blow through me again. Being invisible hurt, but being visible on my own terms healed something deeper. That's what dignity tastes like. Quiet, solid, unshakable. A few days later, I went back to the cemetery, bought one white lily. No speech, no fanfare. Hazanon. I stood between their graves and whispered, I made it anyway. I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't expect one. I turned, stepped back onto the gravel path, and left. Not running, not broken, just ready. That evening, I sat on the couch and recorded a voice memo. My own voice felt stronger somehow. You did what many couldn't. You chose truth when silence was easier. Then I opened my journal, wrote one last line. I carried the burden. I dropped the shame. I looked around my apartment now, full of books I picked, art I chose, quiet I earned. The doorbell rang. It was Arden. 2 coffees. Same crooked smile. You still got bad timing? I asked, grinning. Not bad, he said. Just finally right.